Hello, and thank you for joining us today on Matters of Substance. This is Carly Samayoa, and I have Caitlin here as a host as well. Hello, Caitlin.
Hello.
So today we have a great episode ready for you guys, and I just want to take a quick moment before we introduce our guest and let you know that we may be talking about some pretty intense topics today. And so I just want to let you know as you move forward listening to this, there may be things that could be triggering. So just be mindful of that. And so, hello, Rhonda.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. So, we have Ronda Gorby here with us today, and she is going to discuss her path to recovery and her outreach role as a community outreach professional with Footprints Recovery. And you also are partnershiping with Vogue Treatment as well. So, Rhonda, thank you so much for joining us and being open to sharing your story. And I'm just so excited to have you join us and talk about, what's going on in your life and the things that have really helped you in your path to recovery.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I love Porter County Substance Abuse Council, and I love what you do, the awakening and educating and just the awareness in the community.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We really enjoy doing it too, right, Caitlin?
Yes, and we love meeting people, new people, and being connected and having relationships with people.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So, Rhonda, would you kind of start us off with sharing a little bit about why you're here today? Why did you decide to join us, and what kind of got us on the path of linking up with you?
Well, thank you. I grew up in this community, and when, I decided to join Footprints to Recovery, it's a treatment center that's up by O'Hare. I cover Indiana, and one reason that I was attracted to doing this podcast was really helping especially young girls that went through trauma like I did. I grew up in this community with a father that is an alcoholic, and he passed away now of alcoholism, but just growing up in this community, I found that I was embarrassed. We owned a bakery growing up, and I was quite embarrassed when we had to sell the bakery and move into government housing in town, and all that shame or that guilt of, trying to be there for my brothers and sisters and that sort of thing, I just shoved under the rug. And when I went to school, at Purdue and made a lot of money and that sort of thing, I just hid all that trauma. And so therefore I started drinking heavily, and at age 38, I'm 51 now, about 12 years ago, I decided to kind of put the vodka bottle away and decided to quit drinking and make healthier decisions. So I'm hoping that someone out there that's listening, has family members that have struggled with substance use disorder, or just drinking heavily to numb the trauma or numb the pain. Hopefully some tips that I can share can resonate with them. And I had to reach out for help. I still reach out for help. I go to church here locally at Grace Point. I still go to counseling. I still the list goes on and on of all the things I do to get through my healing, and hopefully what I share can help.
Yes, we appreciate that you're going to share that. And I think one of the things as we were talking before this is you talked about a lot of different things that you do to kind of keep you focused and strong in your recovery. And I'm really hoping that you can share some of those tips because, they're wonderful. You have a very diverse way of really centering yourself, and it's pretty awesome.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I do recommend anybody out there to ask for help. I think that was the first thing is I always thought, I'm going to pay my own way through college. I'm going to make a lot of money and buy my own house. I don't need to ask anybody for anything. And that was okay until it wasn't okay. So I realized I really wanted a healthier marriage, a marriage in general, and just to stay committed and learn how to respect myself, learn how to respect men. That was a big part of why I would drink, to just realize that I needed to learn how to do those things. So in doing that, I do go to recovery meetings. I highly recommend. There's so much help that you offer, calling in here. You can direct people, but finding a community where, like a tribe or, people that are like-minded, that's what I do now. So on a weekly basis, I do go to recovery meetings. I recommend that Now they're virtually. So I love it. I've connected with people in Italy and Australia, people that are in recovery. I'm like, I will come visit, once this COVID blows over. But definitely I have, that is probably first and foremost. But it wasn't just that. It's kind of like baking a cake. You can't leave the eggs out, or you can't leave the flour out, or, certain ingredients. So there's so many other things. Church is a big part of it. Finding a local church. I was actually asked to leave a church in the past. I had resentments towards church. I never really grew up in church, so I kind of envy the children that were able to learn about the Bible or forgiveness, mainly just forgiveness and grace that come from, in my mind, it's really about, I obviously love Jesus and love the message of like forgiveness and grace. And that's what's been able to help me stay away from the pain, like healing the pain. So definitely getting involved in church as well. So my self-esteem, is raised when we greet at the door, or, we volunteer and help out to bring food to families in need, and that sort of thing. Volunteering is a big part of my recovery because you give back, so I do that as a priority.
And you recently became a big sister, isn't that correct?
Yes, finally.
Awesome.
I've been wanting to join, but they finally came to Valparaiso, my town here. So, I was volunteering in Royal Family Kids Camp. That's another good one. Helping DCS kids get into a camp. I'd always wanted to go to camp, and when there's no money, you don't go to camp, So we raise money for kids to go to camp that can't afford it. But now that I'm in Big Sisters, I'm looking forward to that. There's a program called Girls to Women. You can always volunteer. The age 11, the age that I went through most of my trauma, that is really the age that I want to focus on and just take them to do fun things. I really wanted a mentor at that age, but I didn't know how to reach out. And yeah, I'm hoping it'll be a great experience.
Well, I think it'll be wonderful. And I know that you will bring some peace and some happiness to some young girl's life, and that's a really exciting thing. You have so much to offer, and I'm excited to hear about your journey as you walk through being a big sister and just kind of seeing how that all goes. I know it'll be wonderful for you and for the gal that you get. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I have a big garden in my backyard, so we'll probably garden together. And like, I am 51, yes, but I'm really like age 11 at heart. So like emotionally, they say when you start drinking, that's actually where you are emotionally. So, I love having fun. So I just vision us like getting our nails done, shopping together, having fun.
Yeah, awesome.
Now, do you believe that had you had somebody like a mentor in your life at that time, that it would have, maybe you would have been able to choose differently, as far as like beginning, with drinking and feeling, having not maybe the healthiest coping skills to numb everything that you had gone through or were going through?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. I think later in life, I went to, Purdue, like I mentioned, and I'm really proud of that experience. But it wasn't really until I was about a senior when I finally reached out for help. I mean, that's actually when I started going back to church and when I really started asking for help and having like a spiritual mentor. But it would have been nice. Yeah, at age 11, that would have been great. I had a couple friends, they would invite me over, thank God, to like a healthy meal where the parents were together. And, we would sit down and maybe do a devotional at the table. And I had those little examples, it was like a ray of hope in kind of a dark time, definitely a dark time in my life. So absolutely, I'm a big believer of if you can invite the other, especially in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that age, before you can really start driving and get out of the house. When you're dealing with trauma or any sexual trauma or any, acting out, like I was with older men at a young age. And I think that if I would have had, women in my life, mentors that were, just coaching me and mentoring me on, that's not a great idea. Actually, I had people in my life saying, let's get you over to Planned Parenthood at like age 13 or 14 so you don't have a baby. And the challenge on that is then, I was actually with older men and there's a lot of trauma that's tied into that. And of course, I would drink to numb that trauma, and I wouldn't really bring it up much. Again, I just shoved it under the rug, bought a big house in where I lived in Naperville. I had a high level job at AT&T, and just the more I made more money, the more I shoved that trauma from when I was young under the rug, and then you wonder, well, why is my marriage not working out? Why can't I have healthy relationships with my family? So absolutely, if you can volunteer at, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, or, volunteer at your church with the teens, absolutely.
And I think we recently learned also, I feel like we're learning so much about you over this last week, and I love it. But we also learned that you are a yoga instructor. So it sounds like maybe there's some pieces of like that yoga, physical connection, meditation that maybe were helpful for you as well.
Oh, without a doubt. There's so much involved with working out in general. So are endorphins, the chemicals. I mean, you can research the heck out of it, but yoga in general, just the awareness, the breathing, the slowing down, the really honoring our breath, that we are valuable just by breathing. So it's not about where I went to school. It's not about, my family background. It's truly about me just breathing, and I've learned that through yoga, also through like going away to yoga retreats. I don't know if anyone's able to do that, to get away, but that has helped a lot, to take time off work. I mean, I love working for a treatment center because I help people take time off work to be able to spend hours and hours in prayer and meditation. That's truly getting deep, deep into the trauma work and opening your heart, mind, and soul. That takes time.
And it must be a very hard time too, right? So like, while I'm sure it's enlightening and it feels good, it's also got to be kind of hard to dive into those layers of trauma that you've just pushed under. And so I know with Footprints to Recovery, there is like staff there that can help clinically through those, like the therapist, correct? So
Definitely. During the detox process, so we have all levels of care, but especially during the detox. So that's like your first 10 days. So your body and your mind and, your soul, everything is just kind of in shock. We're so used to numbing out from the pills and numbing out from the alcohol that's where you need 24/7, supervision. And we have 12 beds, which I like, real small. But you definitely want to take time off work. And then once after the 10 days or so, you'd probably get into, your yoga, and you work out like 3 times a day at Footprints, but it's different for every person. They may just breathe and just, stretch, and it really varies depending on the person. And every yoga class is so different, but exercising in general, just getting in there with like-minded people is important.
when did you start your yoga journey? I'm just curious.
No, it was when I quit drinking. Actually, that's so funny. I was 38, and we listened to a DVD. Her name's Gurmukh, with this huge like red ruby ring and like turban on her head, right? So we just like listened to her. I was with a friend in recovery, and that was like our high, And I still get high off of yoga. That's my buzz. That's my healing. And of course, there's still pain there. Just miraculously heal one day, to the next. You just slowly heal. And yeah, I go to hot yoga now. It's 109 degrees in the hot yoga. It's kind of crazy, but it's a good buzz.
That's nice during the winter times.
Yes. I'll be walking more probably outside now. Hiking is another thing. Hiking, there's a chemical from trees that really gets you high. And so the more you can be around trees, that's what I do. And the more I can get on the water, at the paddleboard, and those things have really been life-changing.
I have never paddleboarded, but I hear great things.
I want to try it too.
Come over. You can come over this summer for sure.
I've only kayaked. Kayak's a great time, but I don't know, something seems a lot more challenging about paddleboarding.
And isn't it amazing how when we're in the midst of either we're early, like we just arrived into treatment, but isn't it amazing how our mind and our body and our soul is able to learn to cope and slowly, like you said, recover from things that we never thought would ever be able to just feel and sit with something, to be able to sit with our past traumas or experiences, and to be able to have new and healthy coping skills. And just, I think it's amazing that our bodies and our minds can do that.
It really is. It is life changing. And so many women that, like, we've had an exercise where you stare into the other woman's eyes, right? So you're like face to face, their eyes are reflecting your eyes, right? And that is so healing. And that's all through yoga and through small groups too. You know, these small groups that we break out into, and as far as the counseling goes, really face to face with someone who's been through trauma that I've been through. That was very, very healing. So it's all tied together. But the reason I keep going back to the trauma counseling is that's where I've healed the most. You know, I mean, definitely yoga peppered in there.
That what you just said kind of speaks to what I've observed as well. Like over time, working in different like places, like I've seen that, like getting to that trauma where you're addressing the trauma, that's where the change happens, right? So if we just keep burying it, and maybe we address it here and there with little things, it doesn't heal us. We have to get deep into ourselves and really feel it, like Caitlin said. And that's a very hard time, but in my opinion, the best way to move forward.
It is.
So you mentioned a lot that previous conversations, you mentioned that you really enjoy being outdoors, and you just kind of hinted on that. And so can you share a little bit about what you do to kind of help center yourself when it comes to like nature and being outdoors?
Sure. Well, prayer and meditation, when I carve that out, especially in the morning, so sunrises are a big deal, you know, and the power of that, like no man can raise the sun, obviously, you know, and no man can like get the tree to grow, that sort of thing. So a power greater than myself. And also grateful that I could see the sun, you know, grateful that I could feel the sun, you know, grateful that I could hear the thunder, you know, that type of thing. So nature is a big part of it. The prayer and meditation as a priority, I'll forget. And then all of a sudden about midday, I'll be like, oh, you know what? I really do need to connect. So I'll just pull over at a park, get outside, walk, just stare up at the sky, you know, a little bit. And that helps. It's just something little like, please God, help me, you know, 4 words, you know, something little, or thy will be done, you know, your will here, you know, to kind of shut me down. They say that pride and ego, you know, I've been taught that it was not exactly an asset of mine in the beginning of recovery. And they would say, you know, ego is like edging God out, like EGO. So I'd be like, where are we going here? If I get anxious or I get just kind of overwhelmed, I do pull over. I tend to, if I'm driving, or I tend to just shut my phone off for a bit, get on my yoga mat, watch the trees. I've got these like 12 oak trees in my front yard. I'll like start counting the trees, you know, something random. But it really does take the edge off. So, you know, I don't have to go grab, you know, a shot of a vodka to take the edge off.
I love how you allow yourself to take a moment when you need it. Because I know even for myself, you know, sometimes I forget to even eat lunch, right? Because I'm just like so focused on what I'm doing in that moment. And I love what you just said there. It kind of reminds me that we have to make those moments a priority, right? We have to be the one to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the 10 minutes. I'm going to give myself this space.
And it is and it's so important. And I'm not trying to say that people who are not in recovery don't need to take care of themselves just as much. But when you have a disease of the mind, body, and spirit that, you know, is related to alcohol or substance or whatever, we have to be so careful, because if you don't take that time like that, it can just do a lot more damage than people think. You know, we internalize it, we hold it in sometimes, and we're like, man, this day has really put me to a point where I could just totally use a drink or something like that, because we didn't take those pauses and times for ourselves, you know, whether it's prayer or just doing that self-care, the things we've learned. If we're not applying what we've learned it can be dangerous, totally dangerous for us.
So that's a great point, Caitlin. And just to talk about a daily, they call it like a daily. I've been taught it's a daily thing because it's true. I can wake up in one morning completely different than how I was the next, the day before. So like every day I read something, I believe in like reading a daily meditation book. And I did get my Bible out of storage. I would not recommend putting your Bible in storage. So when I hit my bottom, I'm like, I need to get that thing out of storage. I ended up quitting drinking when I lived in the Caribbean in St. Thomas. So I decided to do, typically we'll move away and think everything will be better, but we are right there, right? And so my trauma was right there, but I was on this like amazing island, snorkeling, scuba diving, having an amazing time, but my trauma was still there, right? So I did get my Bible out of storage there. That's where I decided to ask for help, live with sober people. I'm a firm believer of living with sober people. And so the sober people I lived with, the people that were actually healing and choosing to heal, they would teach me a lot about prayer and meditation. So she would, recommend some things to read. I loved it, and at first I was like, when I prayed, it was more like a Christmas list of like, okay, I wanted, the $1 million home right here on the Caribbean Sea. I mean, what's so hard about that, God? And, but it was really just like my character. I had to, really step back and be like, please, God, help me not be selfish, something little like that.
I love, like, as I'm listening to your story, I love the picture you just painted, because what I heard in a lot of what you just said was you went to paradise and still realized there was, paradise doesn't matter where you're at. You can be surrounded by paradise and still have something you're carrying that's causing unhappiness and struggle. And you have to address that before you can really enjoy fully what's going on around you.
And also, I have a quick question. As far as treatment centers and, inpatient residential places, all of the things that go on inside the walls with the, various amenities that are offered. But as far as like a location, or some people having this, this thing where they don't want to go away to treatment unless it's in Malibu or in the mountains or something. I mean, I feel like if you're there and you're being offered all of these things, is it really how much of a difference is it really making where the location?
Right. Well, I mean, it matters, a lot. It's a lot to do with the counseling, a lot to do with the clinical behind the scenes. So breaking out into small groups and, but working out, like at Footprints, our gym, putting a lot of money into our gym, a lot of money into the equipment. That is important, in my mind, if you're going to go somewhere. Also, the actual counselors being, EMDR certified, that costs money. So you want to go to a high quality, master level, double board certified, if possible, going where the clinical is offered. Then on top of that, what I like about being fairly close to home within, 2 or 3 hours, there's benefits of that. So your family can come see you on family day. But there's also benefits of getting completely away. So there's pros and cons really with, we have a facility in California. It's Vogue. And what I love about that is they can get more personalized attention. They do get the jacuzzi and the nice pool. I mean, okay, so it is, a really nice area, Tarzania, California. But, then there's outside of O'Hare where, if anyone's been to Chicago, you know what that weather's like. But there's also just sitting by a tree in our courtyard, just going on a trip to, one of the outings with other sober people. So it really is what you put into it, if your mind's open.
So, Rhonda, you've been sharing with us ways that you've used to cope, talking about humor and using that to kind of address some of those traumas you've had. Would you be comfortable sharing with us what led you to needing to find coping mechanisms?
Sure. That's a great question, Carly. I think the biggest thing is just being aware of like, oh, maybe I don't have coping skills, I would tend to go with, I'd always wanted to really be respected and have like a high level of respect for myself and others and have high self-esteem. And people in early recovery would say, Rhonda, when you choose to do respectable things and when you choose to do things that raise your self-esteem goes up. What a concept, And so when it came to coping skills, it was usually going with men. That was a big coping skill that I had. It was a skill, but then all of a sudden it turned into like, why am I not getting married here? Why am I a sideline, girlfriend and that sort of thing. So when I really chose better decisions, it was with sober people giving me suggestions of, hey, how about you, choose better on that note. So that was really, it was a process. It took a while to really respect myself, have boundaries, healthy boundaries. But what led to that, like at a young age, when I was 11, when my parents divorced, that was probably the trauma was really there, where when I would go with older men, that was basically, I uncovered from counseling and from EMDR that was actually rape. And so I never really wanted to term it rape. I actually never thought I was raped. I was like, I had the concept of like, you can't rape the willing, right? Or like if I was dressing promiscuously as a young 12, 13-year-old, well, I led them, say they were older, like 18, 19, 20, quite a bit older. Maybe even later, they were like, say I was, even 17, 16, 17, and they would be like 25, 30, something like that. That's rape. And so to really dig into that trauma, the coping skills had to be there. So now like I said, I still do the coping skills, which is, a big part of it is going to counseling still. Choosing healthier decisions. Like I'm particular, on what I wear now. I don't dress, I'm more modest. And then I also, coping skills for me are the fun things, like choosing a lot more fun, healthier decisions, going out with my husband more, instead of just going out with my girlfriends. Personally, I don't think it's that great of an idea to have, men friends and being alone with men. I tend to just have healthier boundaries. But yeah, the rape, the sexual abuse, whenever I've helped women over the course of 12 years, every single time, so it hasn't been like every other time, it hasn't been 1 out of 3, it's every single time there was that rape or sexual trauma in their background, and then they shoved it under the rug like I did. So their coping skills was, obviously, let's take a pill to numb the pain, let's drink more alcohol, and then the guilt and shame would just be kind of like a cycle. So now instead of doing that, we do, art, music, yoga, essential oils, massages, healthy eating. I mean, it's like I do it all, and I have to do it all. I want to do it all because I'd rather have a great life than just a mediocre good life.
You mentioned earlier when we were chatting that one of the instrumental things that you did to really help you heal was connecting with other survivors, getting into those small groups and sharing the experience that you all had and realizing that you weren't alone in those experiences. Obviously, that's a very intimate thing to talk about, and you don't have to like go into like details if you don't want, but I just want to kind of hear your perspective on how that affected your healing process.
Well, that's a great point. One reason why I chose to work for Footprints at the treatment center is they break out into small groups, right? So you'll have a counselor, and like in my situation, there was a counselor we had 4 women, right? And one was, here I was older, but there's some young, some old, but when we look face to face, when I would look in their eyes and they would share about their sexual abuse or their rape, it was completely different from going to a counselor. I love counseling too. I mean, I still pay my $100, rent a friend, so to speak. It still works, but I still do that. But when it comes to like staring, at somebody who's been abused, like my counselor's not going to open up to me about how she was raped, right? And she's not going to open up to me about her sexual abuse. So, and I'm not going to get as deep of healing from that The deeper healing happened when, and same thing with recovery, when I talked to someone else who woke up the next morning, they were hungover and they realized, oh, I did not want to be with that person last night. That was like embarrassing what I did, spending a night in jail, whatever the trauma was. When I could actually share my story in recovery with someone else and the sexual trauma with other women, then I healed even more, So, it's not just going to recovery meetings. It's not, you're not going to open up to everybody at church about all the deep trauma, but in those deep trauma, like small groups where someone else has been through it, I think that's where I've healed the most.
And I just want to take a moment and just make sure that our listeners who may have experienced these kinds of traumas, that you know of a good resource to call to get in contact with these groups. And that's the National Sexual Assault Hotline. And you can reach out to them by calling 1-800-656-4673. So if you're listening and you realize that you need to get into one of these small groups like Rhonda did to really start your healing, please reach out to them, and we will have that number on our website if you missed it. So thank you for sharing that, Rhonda. That is such a intimate piece of yourself, and I really appreciate and recognize your vulnerability in this conversation. And I just, I'm grateful for you to share that stuff.
Thank you. It's something, like I said, I'm 51, and I always had dreamt about, having a faithful and successful marriage. And I'd always really wanted to be able to, have that self-esteem, have that like self-respect. And I can say, like, from doing all this work, a lot of crying, which I love crying now. I love feeling. There's a high that I get from crying and feeling, and it's a good feeling. So now I actually, when I really pray, I usually cry it, and I love it, And so I hope that listeners can say, like, yes, we kind of go a couple steps back before we go 4 steps forward, so to speak. But now to be married, my dream came true of really having a relationship now with my mom that's healthy. And my dad passed away, like I said, from alcoholism, but for a short time when he did go to treatment, I remember those rays of hope, like where he was like there and present, and he went through his journey. But it's important to see the silver lining around the cloud when it gets pretty dark, because it will get dark while you go through your counseling.
Not everybody is always, in the beginning at least, as supportive of your recovery or your treatment, or when it comes time to, make amends in their way. It's not always as well received by some that we've harmed in our path. So that was something that was like a re-traumatization for me when somebody in my life was like, I think you're, full of it type of thing. That was hard. That's hard. So that's something that you have to, that's why having your like-minded people that you can cling on to during those times, who may understand, resentments and things like that, because sometimes it's hard for your family and your friends to look at you and really accept your amends, at least the first time around, and to listen to what you have to say. So,
No, that's a good point. Having a prayer partner, or like a woman that you can say, a friend, that you can say, can we pray through this, or, someone that's been through that before. So I did, and I still do, open up about things like to my family and to friends that normally I wouldn't talk about. Right. So I just say, I really do get help on that, because I didn't grow up in a healthy environment to know those things. So, and then to really communicate with people, like how we're feeling, is a new thing. This is all like new. And again, I'm not saying that it's perfect. Every day we're learning, we're growing, just continuing to not give up, persevering.
Absolutely. And that's sometimes the hardest part, right? Like, don't give up. Like, when we're surrounded by darkness, giving up feels like the better option. And it's so important that we don't, because there is beautiful things on the other side of that darkness, and we just need to get through it to see it. And all the things that you've talked about are ways that we can work on getting through that darkness.
Yeah, and I think pretending is a big part of my background. So pretending at age 4, I was adopted. So like my mom, it wasn't that I was in a foster home or anything, but it was where my mom decided to marry another man, right? So like at 4, I was Rhonda Hoover, and then it was Rhonda Hensey, right? So when I changed over to the Hensey family, it was just challenging, you know. So all that trauma that I went through at a young age of, you know, wanting to be accepted, you know, I just pretended like I was okay. And what I'm getting at is it's like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine, right? So it just carried over into my adult life. So you would look at me, and even today when I go to counseling, they're like, oh, you seem so put together. I would have never known you had that drama. And I just pretend. And the downside on that is that's when I would, you know, 12 years ago, drink a lot of alcohol to numb out and hurt a lot of people in the process. And so going back to those people, if I can't go back to them, to do what's called a living amends, which means just treat especially men with more respect. And every day I can go about my day and choose to do that. My husband being first and foremost, you know, respecting. We don't learn that in our society very, very well. So, yeah, respecting, apologizing, but also like living it out, you know, like paying attention to how we treat people.
So, kind of like being intentional, right? Like acting with intention and not just living in the moment without realizing how we're responding to the people around us.
Yeah, addicts and alcoholics, and you know myself, I've learned this about my character is I, by nature, wake up and I'm very self centered and I'm very selfish. Now, I never did have children, so I give myself a lot of grace on that note. I've never really had to get anybody ready for school or like, let's go brush your teeth. You know, I never really had to cook for anyone, quite frankly. But now I've learned there's also a selfish, self centered part of me that every day when we do our prayer meditation, when I do my, again, all those things, the yoga, the music, you know, just looking at my plants around my house, like it's so little, but like the plants are a big deal, you know, keeping the plants alive, you know, keeping my cat happy. These are things that really have helped me. So pet therapy, huge advocate of pet therapy. That's why there's like pets in pretty much every treatment center, or like I recommend getting plants, getting pets. You can do a living amends through that process of like I kept my plant alive. You know, I didn't harm my plant. Or, you know, back to the mentoring, you know, like if I help another woman, I help women that get out of jail get a job or get placed in, if they don't go to Footprints, you know, placed other places and sober living places, and it's fulfilling. You know, so trying to volunteer, that's a living amends.
I love that you've taken what has been trauma in your life and you've put it into really truly helping everybody around you, because we're not talking, as you're saying all these things, we're not talking about just your people, right? We're not talking your family only. You're talking about the whole community. You know, it sounds like a lot of the elements of the things that you do in your life are focused on helping others, and that's wonderful to be able to give back and really like just soothe someone else's soul when they need it. That's amazing.
I agree with that. And I really like, you know, we're full of excuses of why I don't have time to do this or I don't have time to do that. But, you know, yes, giving back, because how long were we taking from other people because, oh, help me, you know, I need a ride. Like I've been drinking, or I need you to do this for me because I can't because I'm intoxicated, or I need you to listen to me because I don't know how to effectively express my emotions. So I'm just going to suck all of the energy out of you so that I can feel better, type of thing. So being able to give back, it's wonderful. And I love hearing about you and your recovery, because someone that I know said, would you rather have, I think she says, would you rather have a filet mignon sobriety or would you rather have a bologna sandwich sobriety? And it goes something like that. But it's so true. Like you can be a dry drunk in recovery, as they call it, where you're just, keep doing the same thing every day, but you're not drinking, you're sober, but you're just sort of there. Or you can be doing how Rhonda is doing, and it's amazing to hear all of this, and it's really inspirational, and it's really encouraging. It's encouraging.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing to like be able to volunteer and like give back, like something little, like taking a picture of my prayer or meditation, what I read that morning, and sending it to someone else is life changing. It's like then we could be their lifeline, and then they would send things back to us. Really positive things like, you get those morning meditations that are very inspirational, very spiritual. They do plant seeds in us. So it's not really just about the coping skills. I think coping skills can kind of lead us into that victim mentality a little more. Whereas it's like, how about we are serving? Like if I have the word serving, my life gets better when I serve. So it is kind of a selfish angle on it. It's like it all comes back to me, like how can my life get better, right? But when our lives, if we want our lives, and if I want my life to get even better and better, the more I serve, the better my life gets. I've tried it. And then the least amount I serve, my life turns into like, kind of negative Nelly, Debbie Downer, whatever. I mean, it's like, then when I'm serving, I'm like, oh, this feels great. No matter what the circumstances are in my life, you're helping another person, maybe get their children back, maybe help someone be able to pay child support. That was a hard thing for me. My dad actually got put in jail for not paying child support. So it was really sad. But when we can really give back to the community, our lives gets better. So I guess it is somewhat selfish, but I wake up every day like, how can my life get better? And then I serve, and it worked.
Quick question. As we were talking about, people getting their children back and being able to pay what they have to pay and things, what would you say to people who may not be able to leave work, or they may not be able to completely take time off work? Maybe they have to go part-time. What would you say to someone who really, they want to get as much out of treatment as possible, but they may not be able to do it, where that's all they're focusing on?
Yeah. Well, having mentors, again, going back to mentors or, spiritual guides, so a big part of whether you go to treatment or not, I mean, if you can take time off, time off work is important because there's a lot of healing, and I don't think peppering in just an hour a week is going to really do that personally. But, and so if it's a man, taking time off work is a big deal, a little more of a bigger deal than a woman. But for, going part-time, I would say put your recovery first. This is what I'm trying to get at. Put our recovery first. When I've done that, everything else works out. Mm-hmm. So if you need to live with more people, which I had to do, is a little embarrassing. Here I had this like big house in Naperville, $300,000 house. You think, why not just live in the house? Well, I actually chose to live with sober people. Remember, I moved to the Caribbean. And the reason I did that was I knew I needed help. I couldn't live on my own anymore. That was just me. So why I like treatment is it kind of forces you to have a sober roommate. But if you can get someone to move in your house that's sober, they'll pay $500 a month or whatever, and you'll both be able to focus more on going to meetings, going to your counseling sessions, doing fun things too. If you have a motorcycle, buy a cheap motorcycle. If you're a guy, just go motorcycle riding, whatever your thrill is, I think, women taking time off work is a little easier with the way society perceives it, but highly recommend taking some time. I mean, if you need to get on unemployment, go on unemployment. That's what our tax dollars is for. Also with the food stamps and living in government housing a little bit. I actually did that, and I'm okay to say that, in public to anybody because it's what I needed. I also judged my parents, my mom, for going into government housing so much that it was like I had to go through that to heal and not be so judgmental. We used food stamps. I was very bitter about that at like age 11. And it's what it's there for. We all carve out 20% of our income or whatever, and that's what we do. We help each other.
I like kind of what you just talked about, how you needed to experience something that actually was a trauma for you, but from the perspective of somebody who needed that like assistance, right? So like you're sharing that you guys had food stamps and that was really hard, and then you went through a period where you needed it as an adult, and that was actually something that really opened your eyes, because I think a lot of times we operate from our perspective, right? So my perspective as an 11-year-old child and not feeling like we have everything we need may be very different than the perspective of my mother, who says this is how I'm going to feed my kids. So I don't know, just kind of reminds me of like perspective is so important for us to understand what goes on. Sometimes we have to take ourselves, just as a general statement, like sometimes we have to take ourselves out of the situation and stop focusing on how we see it and think about how other people may be seeing the situation.
Right, exactly. Trying not to judge, yeah, that's tricky. But I will say that the most healing happened, when I asked for help. So that was even asking for the government to help me, right? So I used to judge it quite a bit, and I still don't like, a lot of the fraud that goes on, obviously. But there is a need there, and we do as a country meet that need. I believe in that system. Yes, it can be a little corrupt, but at the same time, if people could really take time to heal and, maybe take time more with their family, um, but definitely getting away to a treatment program, even if it's for 2 weeks, just to kind of crack open. Our heart gets so hard. So maybe just to crack it open just a little bit.
I think kind of a lot of like what you're saying is reminding me of like moments like, obviously going into recovery treatment is not anything like vacation, but like having like a vacation kind of refuels your spirit, like getting away from your normal everyday, what you deal with, and going somewhere and experiencing some lighthearted fun really kind of just revitalizes you, or at least I know it does for me. And I guess like in essence, that's kind of what I'm hearing a little bit of, like get away from your surroundings, your everyday, and get yourself connected and getting revitalized. And then as you're doing that, you're also healing from your trauma when you're in treatment. And so it kind of all connects together to really, help you start that path to recovery.
Definitely. I'm a big fan of vacations in general. I'm not going to lie. Okay, so when I did go to college, I worked for the airlines down at Purdue, like a little like airport down there that would transfer people from Lafayette to O'Hare. But anyway, so I traveled at a young age, and that was able to be my high as well. So even to this day, here I am, 51, and planning a trip. So I think trips, like I'm going back to the Caribbean, you when you do those trips, it is definitely healing. So taking time off work, we get paid, everyone usually gets a week at least, take your vacation. FMLA, I'm a big fan of that. I think you have to be at a company a year, but take that. I mean, it's there to say, take your time, and especially during this COVID crisis and emotionally going through, maybe more deaths with overdoses and things like that, we need to take time to cry and feel that pain. And let's face it, no employer wants you coming in a blubbery mess, like heal, get with like-minded people, go to treatment if you can. But book your vacations. Highly recommend rest and sleep. I slept a lot, in my first year of sobriety, and I would just like literally stare out in space a lot, like in the first year of sobriety. So, I mean, you might think, gosh, what are you doing? And people would somewhat persecute you a little bit in the beginning, but live on less. We don't need much. Just live on less and change our budget a little bit.
Yeah, change up what we're doing and get to like the minimum again and refocus ourselves is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And now we can get such good deals like on air flights.
An
It's
Airbnb.
like,
Hey.
hey, book it, definitely. And then, just getting out in nature again, tying that in with vacation. It doesn't cost anything to go to the beach, thank God.
That's like my place of like calm. And luckily here where we're at in Northwest Indiana, we have a lake shore, which is almost like an ocean because it's so big, Lake Michigan. So you get like that. You can have like that little beach day. We also have hiking and wooded forest. Like we're in a pretty good spot for being able to connect to nature. And I know for me, that's a huge healing moment for me. I wanted to quickly just brief on one thing I want to know about footprints, and I'm not sure, I don't think we've discussed this in the past, but does footprints have any like family support built into their program? So if somebody's coming for treatment and they have like a mom or dad who kind of needs help going through some healing themselves so that they can better help their child, is there anything like that with footprints that can?
Definitely. Definitely. I would highly recommend partnering with a treatment company that has that. We do. So there's a book that we recommend called Codependent No More. We highly recommend it. Obviously, you can go to Al-Anon. We recommend that. But we personally have a free Zoom every Thursday night, and they can contact you, or obviously they can contact me through Footprints to Recovery. They could contact me and I can give you the Zoom code. But basically, what it is for an hour, maybe 50 people get on, we might have quite a bit more now, but their family, friends, relatives, coworkers, whatever. When you have someone going through that, it's a support system. So it's nice. They talk about coping skills for them, like how do they handle the pain that they're going through, right? And then family day, that's important. Driving up for family day or flying in, we're right by O'Hare. Like I said, Footprints is opened up now. COVID's kind of blown over there, thank God. And we test everyone coming in. But making sure that the family is taken care of. Also, we have a 24/7 admissions, which I like. So anytime you call, so the family, the friends, the coworkers call, and the client, every day we keep in touch with them. So we pay more into our admissions to have support. So you may not want to go to treatment right then, or your family, friend, coworker may not want to go right away, but it's that everyday contact. So you'll be contacted and supported. The client will be contacted and supported. Typically, you don't find that because that costs extra money to have staff to do that.
That's wonderful because I'm thinking of like a gal that we had on the show one time, and she had a son who was struggling with heroin use, and unfortunately he passed away. And one of the things that she says to this day and like really advocates for is the fact that there aren't a lot of resources available like all the time, right? So like, okay, 9 to 5, sure, that's great, but what happens at 8 p.m. when your son comes to you and says, I need help? You're waiting till the next morning. I mean, that's really hard. So it's great to hear that you guys have 24-hour support.
I think that's important. I could give you like Footprints to Recovery. I could give you our admissions. They're all in recovery as well. I mean, I could give you, if you're open to it.
Yeah, why don't you share that contact information?
Well, it's footprintstorecovery.com. Mention Ronda. That's me. That you listen to Ronda, Help Me Ronda, the Beach Boy song, right? So it's 855-628-2899, and it's 855-628-2899. You can always call me direct. They have my number as well, and then obviously calling in here, they can get my number. But definitely calling into admissions, sharing your story. If you'd like to call me, I can give you my direct line as well.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So if you call me direct, I'm at 224-213-3391, 224-213-3391. It's Footprints to Recovery and Vogue, VOGUE. You can research both of those companies. But as we talk, it may not be Footprints or Vogue. We might just find out where, what they're looking for, what type of trauma they've been through. And so we help everybody. Like even this 14-year-old girl that her mom was put in jail recently, and there was just no one, Medicaid was all full. I do help Medicaid cases as well because it's just a passion of mine, so let me know.
Yeah. So yeah, I will say that here, we hear so much about how helpful you are to anybody who calls, whether they're going to Footprints or whether they're going, they have a different need, and you can connect them with whoever that need is. And we appreciate knowing that we can, connect people to somebody who's going to really advocate for them. That's important to us as well. So
yeah, thank you. When it comes to Indiana, that's my territory, so to speak, but other states, we're in 6 states. So, just let me know. I know you have listeners from Washington, D.C. and, Illinois, and I think you said Virginia, right?
Yeah, a little bit all over.
Let me know. I'd love to help. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah.
I'm grateful.
We appreciate you joining us today. And I'm just so excited we were able to do this.
Yes, thank you so much, Rhonda. It has been great.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening to Matters of Substance. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and at our Facebook page.